Welcome back to ch205. This is the next video clip on writing VBA program to use array and average the list of numbers. So in this video I'll be talking about how we can dynamically change the size of an array, because initially we don't know how many numbers will be in the list. Like in this worksheet, you see there are 9 numbers, but another user can enter 51 numbers. So the question is, if I want to write my code in terms of an array, then when I introduce the type of the array using the dim keyword, if I don't know how many numbers will be in the worksheet, I cannot put a number here, because if I put, let's say, 20 as like last video, then if the user enters 30 numbers, then that would be an error, because the maximum number of numbers that I can read using this array would be 20. So I want to have an array with a size that is dynamic. It is not fixed before using the code. So the way to do that is, when you introduce the array, you don't put any numbers in here. We just put open and close parentheses, like this. And then this is pretty much the rest. The rest of the code is pretty much like what we did before in the last video when we used array. We get to a point that we go over the numbers and we read every number from the list. Okay, so so if you remember, we had a while loop there that went over the list, and it captured how many numbers we have. So in that case, we can get the number of numbers, or we can ask the user to enter the number of numbers. Like in this case, the first number would be the number of numbers, and then the other numbers we have in the list would be the number we wanted to find the average. Like in this case, the user says, I have 8 numbers, and then numbers start from row 3. So 43 all the way to 33 would be 8 numbers in total, for which we want to find the average. Now, we write a code such that when it reads the first number using this line, it gets the number of numbers, and then we define the input number array. So initially we define it without the size. So the size is basically, we left it empty there. There's nothing in between the parentheses. As soon as we read the first number here, we redimensionalize our array. So the command to use is ReDim, and then we use the array variable, and then the number of elements in there where we want to redimensionalize. Okay, so the first number is read from here, which is 8, and then 8 is going to be the number of numbers. Then we redimensionalize the array to be, or to have 8 entries or 8 elements. The rest of the code continues, without any change like before. Now we set the array. We go over the numbers from the 3rd row all the way down. We read the numbers. We increase the act row. We store the numbers into the array. Then we check if the number of numbers is bigger than 0. We call the function summer. We pass the number of numbers, the array, and then the average we want to get. Then the function calculates the average as before, and then spits back the average as the 3rd argument. You see that? And then we're going to print the average on the first column, the keyword average, and then the value of the average on the second column on this spreadsheet. So the key point here is, if you don't know the size of the average by the time we write the code, we can get the size of the average from the spreadsheet, having like the first number as the number of elements in that array, and then as soon as we read the first element from this list, like in this row, we read the element, and then we assign that number as the number of elements for the array using the ReDim function. So we have to dimensionalize first, but we don't introduce the number of entries or number of elements there. As soon as we read the number of elements from the spreadsheet, we redimensionalize it. Now we give the exact number of elements. All right. So let's take a look when we run it. I'm going to click on that, go to the run, and run it, and you see that I get the average. Now, if you want to increase the list, let's say I want to add 2 more numbers, 45 and 67. So the total number of numbers would be 10. I'm going to change the first entry to be 10, which is the number of numbers. And then if I read the code, if I run the code will read from row 3 to row 12 only and store 10 numbers in there. Alright, so there we go. So I'm going to go to run and run it and get the result right there. Okay, so that is it. So this is how we can redimensionalize and dynamically write a code for a dynamical array. So that is example 2.4 of the textbook. So I hope this is useful. Thanks all for watching. I'll be right back with the next video on VBA programming.